So I heard there was a question that came up yesterday in the Q&A session about why we're visualizing the Buddhas like this, stacked up above our head and then dissolving into each other. I don't know. There's lots of different sadhanas in the Tibetan tradition related to different deities, different Buddha figures. And in these sadhanas, there's these different visualizations that you're supposed to do. And I don't know where they come from. Maybe in some cases, there are texts called the Tantras that are related to different meditational deities. And these are attributed to the Buddha, taught by the Buddha. So maybe, and I think not many of these have actually been translated into English. So maybe in those texts they contained, guidelines on how to do a practice related to that particular deity. So that might be one source of these visualizations, or they could be later commentaries by Indian masters, Tibetan masters, on how to do the visualizations. So I don't know. I usually we just receive, our teachers, our contemporary teachers, they give an initiation and then they give you this sadhana and this practice and they say do this and this and this and this and this and we just do it without finding out the whole history, the whole background, where they come from. But I don't know, one idea I have, and I don't know where this came from, but maybe in some cases, a yogi, a meditator who's doing retreat and gaining some realizations and having some meditative experiences, that they may have these visions. The actual Buddhas, deities will appear to them and give them teachings and maybe also advise them this is how to do the practice. So that might be another source for these practices. So I really don't know. I'm just guessing. But there are other similar visualizations, like usually in front. Often when we do these visualizations, we visualize in front of us, for example, the practice of refuge that many of you have done. You visualize Shakyamuni Buddha, and then around him, different figures. There's the gurus of the lineage, masters of the lineage, and then there are various lineages, and then other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and so on. So like a whole assembly of different objects of refuge visualized in front of us. And then we do prayers and contemplations, and then at the end, all those other figures dissolve into the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, who then comes and dissolves into us. So that's kind of a common thing, that there may be a lot of figures and they all dissolve into one who then dissolves into oneself. So that's not something unusual. So yeah, I don't really know for sure where this visualization came from. It is unusual to have them many above your head. I mean, there's some visualizations where you have one figure above your head, like Vajrasattva. Many of you have done Vajrasattva practice. So there's Vajrasattva above your head, and you recite the mantra, and then at the end, Vajrasattva dissolves into you. But to have a whole stack of Buddhas, I don't know of any other. I haven't, encountered any other practice that's like that. There may be others, but yeah. So I don't know. But we do need to think that whatever Buddha figure we meditate on, they're all basically the same on the ultimate level. They are the same. They have the same nature, the same qualities, the same realizations. They just appear in different forms, different, like in this case, different colors, different mudras, different vows they've made, and so on, working in different ways for sending beings. So there's those kind of differences on the conventional level, but on the ultimate level, they're all the same. They all have the same realizations. They are, they've all achieved Dharmakaya, the enlightened mind of a Buddha. So they have the same qualities and the same ultimate nature. They're all empty of existing inherently, independently, intrinsically. But that's difficult to understand. But anyway, we should try not to have kind of prejudice or bias or likes or dislikes. I like this Buddha, I don't like that Buddha. That wouldn't be good. Just to see them all as, oh, they appear in different forms to help different people. Some, we may relate better to some than others, yeah. So some people feel really close to this particular Buddha figure and not so close to that one. But we should still have the same respect for all of them and see them all as having the same qualities. And then think that, okay, this one, I feel closer to this one and not that one, but somebody else feels closer to that one and not this one. So that's why they do appear in different forms, is because everyone is different. Human beings and other beings are all different. We have our own kind of internal situation with our karma and our likes and our dislikes and our experiences, our conditioning, and so on. And so, Buddhas will appear in different forms that are suited to different types of people. This is the meaning of skillful means. Yeah. What's that expression? Different strokes for different folks, or something like that. That was way back. Maybe people don't use that one anymore. But yeah, basically it's like that. Yeah. Different people like different kinds of food, different kinds of clothes, different kinds of music, and so on. So similarly, we have different kinds of Buddhas to suit us. Another thing too, we're not sure who is the actual author of this sadhana. There's a name at the bottom, Ngolchu Dharmabhadra, but the originally this sadhana was translated by Lama Zopa Rinpoche back in the 80s, and then there's been a few publications of that, and this is within the FPMT, and the FPMT version has a different name as the author, Ngawang Losang Tenbe Gyaltsen. And I'm trying to find out who is the actual author. And I was thinking maybe one of our resident Tibetan scholars could check if you have time. I know there's zillions of things to do, but what's that? Buddhist resource, Buddhist resource, what is it called? BRC, Buddhist, BD. Anyway, that website where you can get all these different texts. So maybe if someone has time, they could look into that. Because sometimes in the colophon, that at the end of a text, the author gives some explanation. They might, for example, they say, oh, my student so-and-so made this sincere request for me to compose a sadhana with this practice and da-da-da-da-da for easy daily, I don't know. They'll sometimes give an explanation of why they composed the sadhana. So that could give some insight. But we have to go back to the Tibetan text, and we have to know Tibetan to be able to read that. Oh, yeah, okay, so then we have to introduce the next Buddha in the stack going up. Did you get this? Oh, I thought I sent. Okay, well, I'll send it now. I could still go ahead and start talking. So I sent it to you. Oh, dear. I'm kind of spaced out these days. I think this is number 5. Okay, so the next Buddha going upwards in the stack is called stainless excellent gold. And the color is pale yellow. And here we have new mudras. Right hand is in the mudra of expounding the Dharma, teaching the Dharma, like this. And then the left hand in the mudra of concentration in the lap, with the palm facing upwards. So this Buddha made 4 vows. And so his 4 vows involve helping different beings in different situations. The first one is helping those who have committed acts of killing, butchery. It mentions butchery, so maybe butchers or harmful actions causing harm to others. And as a result of these actions, they're born in bad situations, like in hell, or they're born as human beings but experiencing really intense suffering due to the karma they created. So he really wanted to help those beings. And he vowed that if they hear his name and retain it and call it out, their bad karma will be eliminated. They'll have a long, healthy life and will reach enlightenment. Then the second is similar, but with acts of stealing. So he wanted to help those who've done that kind of negative action, which is also the cause of suffering. And so these beings may be born in an unfortunate rebirth. Hungry ghosts, that's often the cause of birth as a hungry ghost. So you're depriving others of their things, and you end up in a situation where you are deprived of things like food and drink. Or if born as a human being, then again you experience deprivation, like you're in a really impoverished situation, lacking even the most basic necessities, food and clothes and medicine and shelter and so on. So due to that, there's a lot of suffering. Or you have your things stolen, right? We've probably all experienced that. So if we have our things stolen, that's the result of stealing karma that we created in the past. So hopefully we learn from that and stop stealing. And respect the property of others. So he vowed to help these beings. Again, if they hear his name, retain it, call it out, this bad karma will be eliminated. They'll get the things they need and will reach enlightenment. Third vow is to help those who are rude and insulting to others. A lot of that going on these days. So if such people, such beings hear his name, retain it, call it out, they will generate thoughts of loving kindness. Wouldn't that be wonderful if everybody could have thoughts of loving kindness and want to just treat others with kindness and respect? It says like parents with their children, good, loving parents, the way they feel towards their children, the way they treat their children. So learning to treat everybody in a similar way, and that they will reach enlightenment. Then fourth, helping those who are bound by desire, anger, and delusion. So their minds are really strongly trapped in afflictions. And also mentioned here, I didn't write it on here, but to help the monastics and lay precept holders, so those who have taken lifetime vows, either as ordained people or as lay Buddhists. But so having taken those vows but not keeping them, having transgressed their precepts and have impure morality, impure ethics, and so as a result of that, then they're about to fall into an unfortunate situation. So for such people, if they hear his name, retain it, call it out, their bad karma will be eliminated, afflictions will be stopped, and they will be able to keep pure ethics without regressing, without falling back to impure ethics, and will reach enlightenment. I guess maybe that's reflected by the name stainless, helping others to have stainless ethics, like gold. Okay, so that's that Buddha. So my plan this morning was to move on to attachment, but then I started thinking about other things to say about anger. So I hope you're not bored with that topic. I find it really interesting. And yeah, and it's so helpful to learn how to deal with it, because otherwise it can be so disturbing. So one thing I thought to say, and this isn't only with regard to anger, but any other afflictions, that, it can sometimes take time for us to recognize that particular affliction in our mind. Maybe for different reasons. It's so habitual. It's so much a part of our character and our way of doing things in our life. It's almost like we are one with it. and, and so we don't see it as a problem, as an affliction. And that could be one reason it's hard to recognize. Or another reason might be that we have a different way of describing it to ourselves. We don't use the word anger, but we use some other word like being grumpy, cranky, bad mood, being upset. Yeah, once when I was teaching a course, and I was talking a lot about anger, and a couple of days into after that, a woman came and told me that when she first heard me talking about anger, she thought, oh, I don't have a problem with that. I don't need to listen to this. But then after hearing more and thinking more, she realized that she did actually have anger, but she was calling it something else. She was calling it being upset. So she did get upset with people, but she hadn't thought of that as anger. So it's good to, just try to see what's going on in our mind, and maybe we're calling it something else. But if we understand the definition of anger, the characteristics of anger, we might recognize, oh yeah. And I have to say, even myself, I once had this experience after many years of being in the Dharma where I got really angry. I won't tell you the details, but anyway, I was really angry. And I kept it inside. I mean, the people around me wouldn't have known that I was angry. It was just churning in my mind. And my mind was thinking of all these ways of getting back at this person. And finally, after, I think it was about 3 days, I finally realized, oh, I'm angry. I don't know why it took me so long. I mean, one reason might be maybe kind of pride or arrogance, like you don't really want to admit that you have that affliction. I should know better. I shouldn't be like that. So, yeah, so it's important to have humility and honesty so that you can accept it and acknowledge it, and own it. Yeah, own it. This is happening in me. It's not somebody else's fault. Because that's another tendency that people can have, like that guy I mentioned yesterday. I thought it was everybody else's fault. Um, and we even say things, we say things like, you make me so angry, or he makes me so angry, yeah? As if the anger is coming from that other person into me. I'm innocent, I'm completely okay. And that person, I was completely fine. And that person forced me, tied me down and tortured me and made me get angry. But it's not like that, according to Buddhism. Because we have we have these seeds or imprints. They use the word seed sometimes, or imprint from past experiences, having gotten angry so many times before in the past. Then there are seeds in our mind, just waiting to be um, nourished by circumstances, and then the anger pops up. So that's actually the main cause of anger arising in our mind. It's the seed or imprint from the past. If we didn't have those, if we didn't have seeds of anger in our mind, we wouldn't get angry. Because someone like a Buddha or an Arhat, someone who's attained nirvana, um, has purified their mind. And so even like that story about somebody coming up to the Buddha and insulting him and just saying all these angry words, but the Buddha was completely calm, didn't get angry, didn't react, because of having eliminated anger together with the seeds, so that it will never grow again, never come back again. So if that's not the case with us, if we're still triggered, if we still get annoyed and impatient, angry, and so on, it's because we still have the seeds of it. We haven't eliminated those, and it doesn't make sense to feel bad about that, because we're not Buddhas. We have to admit we're not Buddhas. We're not arhats. So we're still ordinary, unenlightened beings, and that's just the situation. And we're not alone. I find it helpful to think that way too. I'm not alone. Everybody else has this situation too, and some have it even worse. That's helpful to think, just to realize, yeah, okay, maybe I get angry, but at least I'm not acting it out. I'm not going out and killing and doing acts of violence. Hopefully, you're not. Which is not the case. Many people in the world can't control their anger, don't know how to, maybe don't even want to, and they just act it out, even feel good about it. So that's really sad, creating so much suffering for others, for themselves, and they don't know how to manage it. They haven't learned how to manage it. So just to realize how fortunate we are that we've learned these teachings on how to work with our anger and manage it, and even get beyond the point where we have anger. So anyway, the point I was trying to make here is that it's important to observe our mind, use mindfulness, introspection, observe our mind, our thoughts, our feelings, our experiences, and try to recognize these afflictions. And and then I was also thinking, there's this acronym RAIN. Some of you may have heard of. They use it in mindfulness and therapy. And so I looked it up this morning. I couldn't remember all the points to it, but it's an acronym RAIN, RAIN. And so it's a way of working with afflictions. So R stands for recognize. So that means just paying attention to thoughts, feelings, and also bodily sensations, because sometimes we can detect, there's something going on, like our stomach is tight, our shoulders are tight, sweating, there's bodily things happening that can help us recognize that there's anger in environment. If we're not fortunate enough to have bodhisattva pets like Sophia, who can who can help us recognize we're getting angry, we have to use our own intuition, our own mindfulness to recognize what's going on. So that's R, and then A stands for allow, and that is letting it be without trying to fix it. So I found this, there's probably different sources where you can find this. I found this on a website of Tara Brach. Tara Brach is a Buddhist teacher and therapist, and has some really beautiful practices and teachings and so on, and wrote a really good book called, she's written a number of books, but the only one I've read is Radical Acceptance, which is really fantastic about learning to accept your experiences in a non-judgmental way and with compassion, which I think many of us need to learn. We're too quick to judge and not accept. And if we don't accept these things in ourselves, but deny, suppress, ignore, and so on, that doesn't work. And also this tendency many of us have of judging ourselves, being self-critical, self-judgmental, self-hating even. That kind of reaction also doesn't work, doesn't help, may just make things worse. So I think the second step of allow, the way it's described here, is not really the traditional Buddhist advice, because traditionally, you have advice like, don't let it exist even for a moment, immediately stop it, cut it off. I think that's probably suitable for experienced, mature practitioners. Once you've got to know your mind really well and you're very clear about how afflictions, delusions like anger are harmful, and you have a healthy attitude about them. You're not beating yourself up about them, but you just realize, no, this is definitely not what I want to do. So if you're at that point in your practice, then maybe it works to just stop it. But if we're not there yet, and if we still have these old tendencies to beat ourselves up, hate ourselves, judge ourselves, and so on, lack compassion for ourselves, then that may not work. And I think this other approach might work better. So it's up to each person to determine what's best for you. And I think also just to be able to understand our mind better, to get to know ourselves and how our mind works, and also get to know afflictions and how they work. I personally found that really, really helpful, to just watch my mind and what was going on when I was angry, and just trying to pick, tease apart the different aspects of it, and why I'm feeling this way towards that person and not that person in this situation, and not, so you just gain a lot of insight by observing, not being caught up in, the anger, letting yourself be overwhelmed by it, controlled by it, but just kind of standing back and watching it and looking at it, so you can gain a lot of insight, which is helpful for yourself, but also helpful for others. When it comes to working with others, you have a better understanding of how anger works, or whatever affliction it is. So anyway, this is the advice there, is to allow. But I think maybe we could also include here to own that emotion, to acknowledge that this is coming from me, not from somebody else, so that we're blaming somebody else for our own emotions. And then the I in RAIN stands for investigate. So Tara says, to investigate, call on your natural curiosity, the desire to know truth, and direct a more focused attention to your present experience. You might ask yourself, what most wants attention? How am I experiencing this in my body? What am I believing? Yeah, so maybe look at the stories your mind is telling. Yeah, the narrative, the blah, blah, blah that your mind is telling yourself. And then what does this vulnerable place want from me? What does it most need? So that's kind of sounds like the NVC approach, nonviolent communication approach. Like when we're angry, when somebody's angry, there's some need there. There's a need behind that anger that isn't being met, isn't being acknowledged. And if we can understand what that need is, then greater chance that we can take care of that without feeling we have to act in a kind of aggressive way with somebody else. And then she says, whatever the inquiry, your investigation will be most transformational if you step away from conceptualizing and bring your primary attention to the felt sense in the body. So again, that's not really traditional Buddhist. I've never come across any mention of that in Buddhist teachings. Like, how does this feel in your body? But again, maybe this is something that is helpful for many people. I mean, for me, it was very helpful because I don't know. I think at some point I realized that I was living in my head. I was just like unaware of what was going on from my neck down. And so I think that's not unusual. I think other people may be like that as well. And so it can be really helpful to, get in touch with the body and what's going on in the body. Isn't that an expression? What is it? Body keeps the score. Yeah, so our body and our brain we can learn a lot from that. And then the N of RAIN is nurture with self-compassion. So again, this isn't really traditional Buddhist, but many people do need this because we lack. We don't have that habit, that tendency to give compassion to ourselves, and instead we have the habit of being angry and critical, judgmental, and so on, which can manifest in different ways. But yeah, it is important to have compassion for ourselves so that we can have compassion for others. Because if we're judging ourselves for our anger and our other afflictions and our shortcomings, then we'll probably be that way towards others as well. We won't be able to have compassion and patience towards them. So the more we can bring compassion to ourselves and our suffering situation, our confused situation, then the more we can have compassion for others. Mm-hmm.
We actually just taught this at the Create class or the Newport class last week, and Russell Colts also talks about the RAIN. And for N, he uses non-identification Kind of more like not taking it personal and not identifying with the feeling of I am this feeling. So that's a different way of looking at the N, which is a little more, in line with Buddhism. Of kind of not,
she does say,
okay.
kind of at the end of her explanation, she says, the fruit of rain is realizing that you are no longer imprisoned in or identified with any limiting sense of self. Yeah. So what does he say? Non-identification. Yeah. And we talk about that too, to not identify with the affliction, because it isn't who we are. It's just a mental factor that comes and goes in our mind, and it's impermanent. It's adventitious, not a permanent fixture. So it's something we can free ourselves from by understanding the true nature of things. So I think I was starting to explain that yesterday, and I'm not sure if I finished it. But the reason why it is possible to be free of the afflictions is because they are based on mistaken ideas about everything, ourself, others, the world, just not seeing things accurately. And also they themselves, afflictions themselves, don't see things accurately. When we're angry at somebody, we're not seeing the whole person. We're just seeing one or a few things that we don't like about them and kind of ignoring everything else as if there's nothing good there. So that's totally inaccurate, totally at odds with reality. So these afflictions are mistaken, they're like deluded, perverse, and we have the ability to correct those mistakes and come to see things accurately as they are, how they do exist. And by doing that, by generating that insight, that wisdom, that more correct ways of seeing things, then these delusions lose, afflictions lose their ground. They have nothing to stand on anymore. And eventually, when we have the deepest wisdom, the wisdom that sees emptiness, the true nature of everything, then that's like the weapon, the atomic bomb, the nuclear bomb that completely eliminates them, such that they won't ever come back. They'll never rise again. So wisdom, wisdom, insight, seeing things correctly is the antidote, the way of freeing ourselves from these delusions. Anyway, I just thought to share that method of rain, way of, and it doesn't specifically mention here using an antidote or a tool. I don't know if that's found elsewhere in mindfulness or Western therapy, but I think some forms of therapy, like cognitive, I've heard, is it cognitive therapy? What's it called? Cognitive behavioral therapy. Yeah, I haven't really studied that, but I heard it's very similar to what we do and analytical meditation. And using thought, using analysis to deal with your mind, your emotions, and so on. So some forms of therapy have those kind of methods. Okay. If there's any burning questions before we move on, something that about anger before we move on to attachment.
About anger, I think 2 days ago, at some point, like the anger starts to be invoked. And I was like, is this is this a part of the retreat? But I guess, is this their intention to invoke it? But anyway, I I was tired of doing meditations in my head and an analysis. It's like burnt out. So I decided actually to stay with the feeling. And what I mean, it was a slight irritation. It wasn't full blown anger, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna stay with this. And as I open to the feeling of anger transforms in amazing bliss, like the energy. And what I saw is that my mind is basically labeling this as anger and parroting about what this energy that I'm feeling is according to the situation. And when I focused on the feeling in the body, actually it turns into something pleasant. And then I was like, okay, maybe I can go to rest. And then again,
Maybe you can do what?
I can go and rest. Like I was feeling
Rest.
it, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to rest, and then again, irritation. So as long as I was out of the concentration with the feeling, then my monkey mind basically comes in and interprets the situation in a way. And when I concentrate and focus, then it's like amazing bliss.
That's interesting. Yeah, yeah. It reminds me of an experience I had. It wasn't dealing with anger, but with pain. Back in the very early days when I was first learning Buddhism in Dharamsala. And one day I was meditating, and I was trying to use meditation on the breath that I read about in a book because it wasn't taught in the classes that I was learning. But I thought, this is what I need. I need to calm my mind down. I was meditating on the breath, and I could sit like in full lotus position because I'd done yoga for a number of years. But at a certain point, it would get painful, and then I would change my position to half lotus or something else. So I was sitting there, and after about, 30 minutes, it started to get painful. And I thought, I'm just going to sit here and watch this. This is just an experience, I don't have to label it pain, something like that. I was doing that in my mind. So I just kept sitting, and the pain got worse and worse and worse. And my mind started screaming, like, stop, change your position. And I just continued sitting there. And then all of a sudden, it turned into bliss. It was like this blissful feeling all over my body. And it was like, wow, pain to bliss, just like that. And it only lasted a few seconds. I got kind of excited about it and thought, oh, I want to tell everybody about this. I got some realization. And then it disappeared. But it was just a really interesting experience. Similar, that, our conceptual mind, the way it goes blah, 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 and so on. I don't know. I can't really say what happens, why that happens. But another thing that I'm reminded of by what you say is something in a book by Trungpa Rinpoche, where he talked about, if I remember correctly, it's been a long time since I read it, but yeah, when there's an emotion, when there's some emotional experience, there's two parts of it. There's the kind of feeling part, and then there's the conceptual part, the mind kind of telling the story. And it's helpful to separate those, which is sounds like what you were doing. And I don't remember the whole explanation that he gave, but I remember trying it once with a group of people and just asking them to try that out. And some people said they found that really, really helpful. So, yeah. And maybe that also relates to this, what I just read about getting in touch with the feelings in the body, what's actually going on in the body, not over-conceptualizing. So I don't know. I can't explain these kind of things, but yeah, interesting experience. So lots of different. Oh, did you have? Oh, no, you already mentioned something earlier. You had your hand up earlier. Okay. Oh, okay.
This actually goes back to the sadhana, and I run into this obstacle frequently, but when we're making requests and prayers to the Buddhas, I get really hung up on teasing apart not having the expectation that they'll respond to the request. Like the vows, it's like, how do I not have the expectation that they'll do what I'm asking for? And I get confused on it's like praying to God to do these things for me. So, but there's a big emphasis on making requests. So how are they helpful?
Well, I guess just to be aware that we shouldn't have such expectations, like, do this, Buddha, come on, right now. And also understanding karma, cause and effect, that it isn't the case that the Buddha will just do something for us and make something happen, but we have to create the causes. We have to do the right things. And so just, I guess, getting more understanding of that, and then not having that expectation. Okay, we make this request, and yeah, I guess what I think sometimes is with these kind of prayers, it's more like expressing what I want to do, right? So I want to do this kind of practice, develop this kind of quality, create the causes for this to happen. Yeah, that it's really more about me. Because they say the Buddhas from their side are ripe and ready to help us every minute, every second. But what obstructs that is ourselves. That we have blocks in ourselves to receiving that help, or we lack the karma, the positive energy to be able to receive that help. So it's really up to us. It's on us to create the causes for these things to happen. So I don't know if that's helpful. And also maybe recognize that if you did have previous experiences with another religion where it was explained differently, that you just pray to God and then everything will happen. Whatever you pray for is going to happen. That is not correct. That's not our... Sorry?
I have a lot of aversion to that mentality.
Yeah. So just to see that that's still operating in your mind, or there's some leftover of that in your mind, and understand the Buddhist way of how prayers actually work. Daniel.
Thank you. I've been working with that as well, the expectation and requests. And I think it comes down to understanding it, comes down to karma, and that we are not, and seeing ourselves, but as a continuum. So we're making these requests, maybe not for us personally in this lifetime. Maybe seeds were planted for us to be here and connect with these teachings, to plant seeds for a future life. So we can use the Buddhist perspective in that way, as compared to the Catholic, and say we're making requests for the continuity to persist and grow.
Mm. Yeah, and also, when making prayers and requests, I think it's also good to expand our mind in case it's not already written into the prayer, but to think, not just for me, but for others, for all living beings. May all living beings receive whatever good things we're asking for, praying for. So to get beyond this tendency to think of me first, and maybe me exclusively. Open that up. Selden, you had your hand up at one? No? Okay. Okay, so let's move on to look at another biggie, another main affliction called attachment. So the term attachment, these kind of terms can sometimes be a little problematic. in psychology, some forms of psychology at least, attachment is regarded as something helpful, especially the mother-child relationship. This is what I've heard. They say that there needs to be attachment between a mother and a child, both ways, so that the mother will take care of the child and not reject it, and then the child will want to be cared for by the mother and not reject her. So it's seen as something healthy in psychology. So we start by looking at the definition or explanation of what attachment is. So here it's said to be a mental factor. So again, it's just one factor of the mind, not a permanent fixture. And it's based on distorted attention that exaggerates or projects the good qualities of a polluted object. I'll explain. I'll go through the whole thing and explain. Wishes for and takes a strong interest in it. So it has a similar evolution as anger, starting with this belief in a real I, real, solid, permanent I here, and also seeing others and phenomena as real and solid and inherently existing. So just not seeing things correctly. And then we also have this attitude of self-centeredness, me first, I am the center of the universe, I am really important. And and of course we want to be happy, which according to Buddhism isn't a delusion. That's not an affliction, the wish for happiness, the wish to be free of suffering. Those aren't afflictions. Those are just natural instincts. And yeah, it's fine to wish for happiness. Buddha wants us to be happy, but he wants us to have the highest happiness of enlightenment. But anyway, there's this wish for happiness, and then when we encounter someone or something that appears to be a source of happiness, makes us feel good. So we have a good feeling about a particular person or an object, situation, whatever. Then this other thing happens of exaggeration. So just like we talked about how with anger there's exaggeration of the negative qualities of a person or an object, sort of making it seem much worse than it really is. So with attachment, the exaggeration is with good things about the person or the object, so like, this person is so wonderful, this object is so wonderful, I need it to be happy, I can't be happy without it, so there's exaggeration, also sometimes projection, projection of things that we want to be there, even if they're not. We can see that when we fall in love, right? You want this person to be like this ideal image, that exactly what you want, your Prince Charming, your Princess whatever. Yeah, the kind of person you're looking for, the kind of person you need to make you happy. And so we meet someone who seems a little bit like that, and then our mind will start projecting all these other things. This is the person I'm looking for. So that's something that just happens automatically in our mind. And that's what's referred to here as distorted attention that exaggerates or projects the good qualities of a polluted object. So the term polluted isn't like polluted water or air, but it has to do with ignorance. Polluted by ignorance. So people or things that are caught up with ignorance, not free from ignorance. So those are polluted things, as opposed to like Buddha, nirvana, enlightenment. Those are free of pollution, unpolluted. So it needs to be a polluted object to have attachment. And then the last part is it wishes for and takes a strong interest in it. So there's this sense of wanting to draw the object close to you, wanting to draw close to the object, wanting to get closer. And it can even become stronger, such that you want to possess the object, you want to own it, and keep it close to you as much as possible, not separate from it, want it to be there forever. Okay, so those kind of feelings or ideas also play a role. So, so that's a description of attachment, but it may be harder to recognize than anger. May not be as strong, for one thing, and also I think it's easy to see how anger is disturbing and painful and creates problems, but not so easy with this one. Not so easy to see. In fact, Daniel Goleman, psychologist who I think he's also a meditator. I'm not sure if he considers himself a Buddhist, but he, makes bridges between Buddhism and psychology. And one of his books, I think it may have been Emotional Intelligence, he talked about research that was done on certain emotions like anger and fear. But he made the comment that they haven't done any research on attachment because it's considered a social norm. It's not considered something afflictive or problematic. Yeah, and I probably some people feel they can't live without attachment. They couldn't be happy without attachment. It would be bad for the economy, bad for the world if we didn't have attachment. So yeah, if we've been influenced by those ideas, then it may be harder for us to recognize that it is problematic. So we'll look at disadvantages of attachment. The next slide. But then the next bullet point mentions different terms that are kind of different forms, I guess we could say different forms of attachment, like greed. So that's usually, wanting more and more and more and never satisfied with what you have. Craving, that term is used in Buddhism, craving, but also with addictions. Yeah, that term is often used with regard to being addicted to drugs or alcohol and having a craving. Also food, right? We talk about cravings for food, cravings for chocolate, for ice cream, and so on. So that's a form of attachment. Grasping, another term that's similar. And covetousness, this is actually one of the 10 non-virtues of mind. It's a non-virtuous action of mind, and it's where we want to own something that belongs to somebody else. So we visit somebody's house and we see something nice in their house and we want that for ourselves. We see a nice watch that they're wearing or a nice phone that they have, and we have this wish, this desire to make that our own. And yeah, it's just a mental thing, but it's not just wanting that or admiring that, but actually starting to think of how to get it, like, oh, if I ask them really nicely or if I steal it. So you make plans of how to get that object and make it your own. So that's a really gross form of attachment. And then desire. But we have to qualify afflicted desire. because the word desire is sometimes used for positive things, like they talk about desire for enlightenment, desire for nirvana, desire to help all sentient beings. And so the word desire itself isn't a negative thing. It depends on what we desire and why we desire it. So afflicted desire would be having desire for something that isn't, pure and positive, like desire for chocolate. Similar with craving. So yeah, there's different forms of attachment, different degrees, some more intense, others more mild. So yeah, we just need to watch our mind and try to recognize it in our mind. And it may be more difficult to overcome than anger, because for one reason, anger is painful. It doesn't feel good. Whereas with attachment, because it draws us close to things that give us some degree of pleasure or happiness, then it, you know, maybe we may have a lot of reluctance to give it up. And so, yeah, good to look at the downside of attachment. And just the last, so next bullet point, just different kinds of objects we can get attached to. People, of course, pets or animals, so not just human beings, but other kinds of beings we can get attached to. Then, of course, material things, money, clothes, jewelry, devices, homes, and so on. So things of a material nature, but also things that are more abstract, like ideas. So we can also get attached to certain ideas, even beliefs, and cling to them, even if they're incorrect, but we just don't want to give them up. And reputation. That's they say one of the hardest forms of attachment to give up. We really care about what other people think about us, say about us, and so on. And so I guess I don't do any social media, but I guess that's a big thing on social media is, presenting an image of yourself as often not really the way you are, but fabricated image of yourself, hiding your faults and your problems and your, not so good things, and just showing positive things to get people to like you. And then pleasant experiences. So that would vary from one person to another, like traveling or different kinds of sports or dancing, sex, and so on. So those pleasant experiences that we have, we can get attached, addicted to those. People sometimes ask about attachment to Dharma. Is that considered an attachment? I guess it could be. Yeah, it could be. It could be a form of attachment, like attachment to practice, to meditation, to Dharma friends, Dharma activities, Dharma teachers, and so on. So there could be attachment there. And they could be problematic, like what can happen with teachers, getting attached to a teacher. You want attention. You want that teacher to give you attention, to notice you, to spend time with them. And then if you don't get as much attention as you like, you can get upset, angry. You can also get jealous if you notice somebody else getting more attention than you. So it can lead to some kind of ugly, painful things. And another problem that could happen is, if you're like a parent and you have children, and you're really attached to meditation and practice and going to the Dharma center, and you're neglecting your children, not giving your kids enough attention that they need. So that could be problematic as well. So I think it's better to have a healthy interest, healthy interest in Dharma and studying and practicing and being with Dharma teachers, Dharma friends, and so on. But try to watch your mind and notice if it's excessive and unhealthy and leading to problems, and then figure out a solution to that, or ask your teacher for advice on how to deal with that. But I tend to think, we can't, attachment is so deep and habitual. We can't just get rid of it like that. Well, it's true for all the afflictions. So I tend to think, well, it's better to have attachment to Dharma and Dharma people than other kinds of attachment, that people have, like football or, skiing or partying and so on. It's a healthier form of attachment because at least it's helping us go in the right direction of learning things that will eventually lead us out of attachment, become free of attachment. And also attachment to teachers. The teacher will probably not reciprocate our attachment. Attachment becomes really sticky when you're attached to somebody else and they're attached to you, and then it's like this, really sticky. But with teachers, that wouldn't happen. You may be attached to them, but they're not going to be attached to you. So it's like and they'll probably have a lot of wisdom and skillful means to help you decrease your attachment and get rid of your attachment. But at least, having attachment to teachers will help you to, keep coming back, coming back and listening to what they say and getting teachings from them, so your wisdom will be growing and so on. Your spiritual practice will grow. And then the other big question that people usually ask is, well, okay, what about ordinary people, my family, my friends, and so on, my pets? So is it wrong? Attachment to them is wrong or bad? So one thing that we need to understand is the difference between attachment and love, because most people, I think, mix those two, and can't see any difference. So one way of explaining the difference, which I think is really helpful, is that attachment is more about me. It's about my happiness, my pleasure, my good feelings, and a person or a pet or whatever that gives us those good feelings, that's attachment. So we get attached to that person or that being, wanting those good feelings. So we want to stay close to them and be nice to them to make sure that they don't get angry at us and leave us and so on. So it's very much about ego. And love, genuine love, the kind of love we're trying to cultivate in Buddhism, is about the other person. We're more concerned about them, their needs, their happiness, helping them, benefiting them. So that's love. So there's little or no ego, selfishness involved. It's about the other person. So So it's good to watch our mind, watch our thoughts, our feelings, and then try to recognize the difference between those two things, attachment and love. And then the ideal thing, although it takes time, is to decrease the attachment and increase the love, so that we have more love, less attachment. Because I think for most people, those two things are sort of mixed up, mingled, and we can't see the difference. So, as a practitioner, follower of the spiritual path, it's best to recognize the difference and increase the love, have more concern for the other person, less concern for oneself and one's own wishes and needs and so on. Now that's just a very general guideline, but that doesn't mean we totally neglect ourselves and totally give in to the other person. Every time they want to do something, we have to say yes. And of course, things like abuse. Yeah, if the person is behaving abusively towards you, that doesn't mean, well, this makes them happy and I don't care about myself, so let them beat me up, let them mistreat me. No, no, no. So that kind of thing isn't right. But this, yeah, these are kind of things we can discuss later. But that's just the general idea of that question of attachment and love, the difference between them. So then the last point is it leads to discontent and perpetuates samsara. So I hope I did this correctly. I thought I made a, yeah, so the next slide has disadvantages of attachment. So, so here are some things to think about. Maybe in the next, I don't know, next meditation, will that be a guided meditation, the next meditation session? So there could be a contemplation of disadvantages of attachment, because again, it's not so easy to see these. So the Buddha said somewhere in the sutras that following desire is like drinking salt water. It leads to more desire, not to satisfaction. So I don't know if anyone's ever tried drinking salt water. I guess it happens when you're in the sea. It comes in your mouth. But you know, if you imagine being really, 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 really thirsty, and you get water to drink, but it's salty water, and you drink it because there's nothing else. But what is going to happen as a result of that? Is that going to quench your thirst, take away your thirst? So I think we can guess that it will just make us more thirsty, increases thirst. So Buddha used that analogy for desire attachment. So if we have desire attachment and we follow it, we go after the things that we're attached to, try to fulfill those desires, then the result will be more desire. Creates more desire and doesn't lead to satisfaction. So it's good to look at that in our experience. We probably have experiences of that where we wanted something and we thought, oh, if I have that, I will be really happy. And then we get there, we have that, but now what? And then we want something more, better, and so on. And of course, I mean, when it comes to manufacturers, they know this very well. They're always making new models of cars and phones and computers and so on, different kinds of commodities, new, better, sleeker, faster. And so they know, yeah. People will get dissatisfied with the one they have and want this new one. And so then they can make more money. And I guess clothing as well, fashions, you know, every year there's some new thing that's in fashion. So you have to get this new kind of shirt or shoes or whatever, sunglasses. So anyway, just looking at our own experience of wanting something, and then what was the result of having it. And actually, that's another thing. Shantideva, apparently, I think in one of his verses, talks about how desire doesn't lead to satisfaction, because if we want something, then there's two things that will happen. We get it or we don't get it. And if we don't get it, we'll be bummed out, unhappy, frustrated, unhappy. But even if we get it, even if we get what we desire, we'll still be unhappy. So that's another thing to look at. It's kind of similar to what the Buddha said. We eventually get dissatisfied. We might be happy for a while, but eventually, that just becomes another possession, and we're bored with it. And maybe even dissatisfied, we start finding fault with it. And that can happen with relationships too, right? You get your dream partner, and then it turns out to be not exactly what you dreamed about, maybe even a nightmare. This one story. A woman told me that she was married to this man and kind of adored him. She thought he was like a Greek god, just so wonderful, so fantastic, so handsome, so everything perfect. And so she adored him, and he knew that she was exaggerating. He would try to say to her, I'm really not like that. But she didn't want to listen. And then eventually the bubble burst, and she saw him the way he was, and then just got unhappy with him and just got divorced. So we've had experiences like that too. But it doesn't always happen, of course, but it's a common experience, especially our first 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. We were very young and naive, and we don't listen to our parents and our elders who have more experience. So getting dissatisfied. And then the second one is karma. So under the influence of attachment, desire, craving, grasping, we may sometimes do things that are negative, non-virtuous, even stealing, even killing. Murders are sometimes committed out of desire, attachment. So we can create very bad karma for ourselves, which will then, if we don't purify that, will lead to suffering and problems in future lives, even in this lifetime. And then a third point is about expectations, unrealistic expectations. So it just seems to be part and parcel of having attachment, desire, because our mind is creating all these ideas. If I have that, it will be like this, and so on and so on and so forth. So we have a lot of expectations of that person and the relationship we have with that person or that object, and how it will be if we have that object. So our mind creates these dreams, these fantasies, and then that things may not turn out the way we expect. So then we can have disappointment. We can also have anger. Because in a relationship, if you have these expectations of the other person and then they don't live up to your expectations, you get angry at them. And it's kind of funny because, I don't know if people ever discuss this before they get into a relationship. Do they say, okay, I expect this and this and this and this. Do you agree? Will you sign here? I don't think that happens usually. Huh? Prenup. Well, maybe maybe there are some, but I think they're more, and even ourselves, we may not always be aware. They're more like subconscious, unconscious expectations. But then, we get angry at the other person for not living up to our expectations, even though they never really agreed to them in the first place, as if it's their fault and not my fault. So, yeah, that can lead to a lot of suffering and problems in relationships. There's one sad story. A woman that I met, well, actually, both her and her husband came to a retreat that I was leading, and she wanted to talk to me privately, and she told me this very sad story. These people are European, and the man is very traditional. And she said before they got married, he was courting her, kind of, taking her out, buying her gifts, helping her with the dishes, doing all these really nice things. And she thought, oh, wonderful. And then they got married, and he completely stopped all. No more gifts, no more washing dishes, no more. And at nighttime, he'd go out with his friends. He'd go in to hang out with his friends and leave her alone at home. And she's like, but you weren't like this before. And he said, oh, that's because you were my girlfriend. Now you're my wife. So, so he had very different expectations than she did about what it meant to be married. So she was really unhappy. And I had a hard time knowing what to say to her. But anyway, that's just one sad story about unrealistic expectations. And maybe it would be a good idea to talk about that before you get hitched. And then one that I'm sure have a lot of experience with, it disturbs our mind when we're trying to meditate, or even when we're not meditating. But for spiritual practice, we want to be able to keep our mind concentrated on our object of meditation, but it gets taken away again and again, mostly by attachment. It's usually attachment or desire that causes us to get distracted from our object of meditation. So that's a big hindrance to developing concentration, to developing any kind of success in any kind of meditation. Of course, developing wisdom. If we can't concentrate, if we can't have a clear and focused mind when we're meditating, we won't be able to develop the wisdom we need to eliminate all these afflictions and get us to these higher states that we could achieve. So these are some disadvantages. Maybe you have others you could share, but we've run out of time. Maybe in the afternoon we can continue this, and we'll start looking at some antidotes, what to do about attachment.